I've been hearing a lot about SolidJS for the past couple of months. Either I have somehow trained the YouTube algorithm to recommend more videos about it, or it is really gaining a lot of traction recently. Being a full-stack dev using React for 6 years as the UI library of choice, I really got interested because I've heard people say it's just like React but better. So if you want to know what was it like for a React guy to use Solid for the first time, and whether I liked it or not, please stick around. SolidJS is a UI library. It serves the same purpose as React. It even looks like React so much so that I wouldn't blame you if you looked at SolidJS code and thought it was React. I think the majority of this resemblance is coming from the fact that it also uses JSX. For more of an official definition, their GitHub repository says, Solid is a declarative JavaScript library for creating user interfaces. Instead of using virtual DOM, it compiles its templates to real DOM nodes and updates them with fine-grained reactions. Declare your state and use it throughout your app. And when a piece of state changes, only the code that depends on it will rerun. Even though it looks like React, there are a lot of differences under the hood, and those differences make SolidJS shine in my opinion. I would like to highlight 3 of those differences. First, no virtual DOM. React uses something called virtual DOM. To simplify, it's basically a copy of the browser DOM in memory. When we update something in UI, React first updates the virtual DOM, then compares it to the browser DOM and syncs 2 of them up. This is called reconciliation. Solid, on the other hand, compiles templates down to real DOM nodes and executes fine-grained changes on those nodes directly. This gives Solid a solid boost in performance. I'm so sorry, I'm really sorry. 2. State changes do not rerun the whole component function. Let's say you want to have a timer on your page. You wanted to update the state every second. Unknowingly in React, you opened up the component file, wrote the setInterval function with state update inside, and ran it. Oh no, what's happening? Why is my state updating so much? Wait, the browser is crashing. That's how you introduce a memory leak. This happens because React will rerun the component function on every state update, which causes the setInterval function to rerun, which in turn updates the state, and so on and so on. You get the point. It loops infinitely. In SolidJS, this won't happen. SetInterval will only run once, state update will do what it was meant to, and your browser won't crash. This is because Solid doesn't rerun the component function on every update, it just runs it once. 3. State can be decoupled from the components. If you want to write useState in React outside the component function, you'll get a big fat error. This is not the case with SolidJS. You can make signals anywhere and use them in any component, resulting in shared state. With all of that in mind, let's actually try out SolidJS in a little app that will help me to learn a new language. I've been wanting to learn Japanese language for a very long time now, and I've dabbled in it, but I've never done any serious learning. To briefly explain, Japanese has 3 different writing systems: hiragana, katakana, and kanji. We won't be touching the last one today. Hiragana and katakana are a collection of characters that have the same sound but different look. The idea is simple. We have 2 main sections of the app, the kana lists and the quizzes. We have a list for each hiragana and katakana, and we have 2 different types of quizzes: multiple choice and drag and drop quiz, which I call bento quiz because there's a game called Kana Bento, which is the same style, basically the same thing. Let's first open up the terminal and generate the project using the npx-git command. I will use Typescript for this one, hence the ts after the template. Now let's create some folders to give this project some sense of structure. There aren't many dependencies that we will need, so let's install them now. I want to have routing, and after some research I found the package for that in SolidJS ecosystem. It's called SolidRouter. The second dependency is a drag and drop library for SolidJS. It's pretty extensive and gives you a lot of customization options. I'll also add Sass as a dev dependency for SCSS support. Next, let's create a file that will hold a list of kanas, and let's also add a types file that will hold some of the types that are gonna be used throughout the project. This is the kana list. It includes 2 representations of the kana, the sound in the Romaji field, and columns and rows which are needed for the layout of the kana bento section. Next, let's make a file where we will hold the routes in. I'll add information about the routes here, like the pattern and different paths that point to it. Now let's head to the index.ts file where we have our app component rendered, and let's surround that with the router component. I'll create 2 pages, home and quiz. Home will house the list section of the app, and you can take a guess about the other page. We can now finally add the routes to the app component. Let's first lazy import the pages so they don't load before we use it, and then add them as routes. We can get the route params in home component with use params, but since we need to listen to the updates so we can change the content of the list, we will also create a signal to to house the needed params. Then we can use the create effect to listen to the param updates and update the state accordingly. This is needed because Solid doesn't rerun the function on update, therefore we need to actually listen to the change and save it as a signal. We also need to make sure that we have either hiragana or katakana in the path, and for that Solid Router gives us use navigate, which we can use to programmatically navigate to any route. Now let's create the component which will actually display the kana in the list. It is important to remember that you can't destructure the props in SolidJS like you can do in React, as that would break the reactivity Solid has. To actually render the list, we can use the built-in for component. It gives us the ability to render arrays, and I personally like it a lot more than having an array.map in the JSX. It even has an option to specify a fallback in case the provided array is empty. Finally, let's create a footer menu for our app so we can navigate to different pages. Solid Router gives us an uppercase A component, which is like an anchor tag but works with the router itself. And with the help of some CSS magic, the first section of the app is done. We can now start working on the quizzes section of the project. Let's first create two components that can be shared between the quiz types. First one being the quiz method chooser. It will give users ability to choose between bento and multiple choice quizzes. This is a simple component which uses Solid Router anchors to navigate to specified paths. The second shared component is the quiz type chooser, which we will use to ask whether the user wants the quiz to be about hiragana or katakana. The state for this will be handled outside the component in the quizzes themselves and passed into the chooser via the props. Let's now start creating the multiple choice quiz. First, we'll need some functions to generate all the questions for the quiz. Each question will hold a kana, answer, and 4 choices. I will need to generate random numbers to pick kanas and choices, and we will also need a way to shuffle arrays. So I'm gonna add those helper functions into a new helper file. Random int function will also take in an array of excluded numbers. If a new random number is in that array, function will rerun, always giving us a unique result. Let's now add the question generation function itself, which will take the kana type, number of questions to generate as arguments, and give us the questions array as a result. I'll now make a quiz question component, which will actually render out each of the questions. It will be controlled from the main multiple choice quiz component we will create later, and itself will only worry about displaying the kana, 4 choices, and answering functionality. With that done, we can start working on the multiple choice quiz component. We will need to keep track whether the quiz has already begun or not, the quiz kana type, all the questions, current question that is displayed to the user, whether the quiz has ended or not, and the amount of correctly answered questions. I'll add a couple of functions here, one that will generate and set the questions, second that will give us the ability to advance to the next question or end the quiz, and third that will reset everything. Component will need to listen to the quiz type changes to generate new questions, which can be handled by create effect. We can now use the built-in switch and match components to conditionally render what we need on the screen. I really like this in Solid, as it gives us a nicer way to do conditional rendering than what we have in React. Last but not least, we can create the multiple choice end screen component that will tell the users how many answers they got right and give them the ability to start over the quiz. We can add that to the switch now, and with that, the multiple choice quiz is done. Let's transition into making the final part of the project, the bento quiz section. Bento quiz is dependent on being able to drag and drop Romaji to correct kana. For that, we are going to use a package called SolidDND. Following the SolidDND documentation, let's create 2 components we will need for drag and drop ability, draggable kana and droppable kana. We can use the create draggable in the draggable kana component, giving it the ability to be dragged. Ordinarily, you would write use draggable in the component properties, but because we need to disable the dragging after removing it to the correct spot, we can use the activators together with the ref and style to control whether the dragging is disabled or not. Next up, let's create the droppable component, which we will do just by using create droppable and use droppable directive. Quick tip, if Typescript is complaining about the directive, you need to define a type for it, and that's gonna fix it. We will need 2 tables to display the draggable and droppables. So let's create 2 components that are going to handle that. Both components are just 2 for loops, rows and columns, that display everything we need. Finally, let's tackle the actual bento quiz component. It is not that different from the multiple choice component, but in addition, it has a timer, which is one of the main points of the bento quiz. The faster you can move everything to the correct location, the better. The timer is added just by using set interval, then we save the actual time elapsed in the signal. To start the timer, we're listening to the has started signal in create effect. Whenever it becomes true, we can start the timer and also remove the set interval on the cleanup. To handle the answering part, we're using some of the events that SolidDND provides. On drag back end is used to set the answer if the cannon was correctly moved, and on drag start is used to figure out whether the quiz has started or not. With everything in place, we can call our Japanese language helper app done. I've had a lot of fun working with SolidJS. As a person who generally dislikes doing much front-end development, it was surprising how much fun I had. It feels very similar to React, yet very different at the same time. Do I prefer it to React? Yes and no. That really is a hard question to answer. On one hand, I really like it. I like it more than React. On the other, it's just not as big as React, meaning that it doesn't have the same huge community as React does. That in turn means that there's not much that is already ready on NPM for you to use in your own projects. I feel like that would slow down the development time a bit. Community size is probably the biggest problem I see with it. Otherwise, I would use it over React all the time. It just felt good and intuitive to use. I will use it a lot in my personal projects, but for work and other stuff, I will first need to really think about what I'm building and then choose. One thing for sure, I will follow where Solid goes and see what more it can provide. Unfortunately, we haven't touched even the half of all the interesting things it already has, and I'm guessing that there's more coming in future. Solid Start particularly seems very interesting, so if you want to see me tackling it, just leave a comment and I'll try to come up with a project that uses Solid Start as the base. We finally came to the end of the video, and I wanted to thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you can have another thanks from me. This is the first ever video project I worked on, and it definitely wasn't up to the standard, but please free to leave any feedback. I'd be happy to hear from you, and the videos will improve as the time goes. With that being said, if you liked the video, please click a like and subscribe. If you didn't, well, there's always a dislike button. Not that you could see the count, but still. Until next time.